Back. What's up? What's up? We back, y'all. We live. We live. Okay, we're gonna get into it. We'll get into another one. Movie the Code. For no fame. Movie the Code. The Summer Sam. Some of y'all might have saw this movie. Some of y'all probably didn't. But I will say this: this is one of Spike Lee's best movie. It's one of his best. This was one of Spike Lee's best movie, other than the movies he usually do. This was him going outside the box, but this movie is about history. Not only American history, it's about New York City history. It's about the hottest summer ever, and it's also about the summer of the blackout. It's the summer of the American serial shooter, the son of Sam, David Berkowitz. When the whole summer, everybody was in a frenzy because they didn't know who was going to pass next. He also had his favorites. But the aspect I'm going to get into today is this is the summer also where hip-hop started off. And I'm going to show you how it all ties together. Because now we're going back into 1976. But I'm also going to show you that this is when punk rock was on top. This when punk rock was one of the top. This before rap. So this is when punk rock was considered the suburban culture or the culture of the underground. Before the such thing as hip hop underground, grunge, all that stuff. Well, something like that. Punk rock. Punk rock comes from England on top of that. But my point is, it was a wave. The same way y'all saw recently when it came to drill rap, it was a drill rap flow that came out of the UK. But a lot of y'all didn't know Europe been behind this music the whole time. Yes, Europe been behind this music stuff the whole time. That's why you're going to see they always went on tour overseas, because they knew the secrets. They knew the secrets of punk rock. They knew the secrets of rock and roll. They knew all of this stuff because it was taught to them. See, when people get it first that before rap was created, they were hanging in punk rock clubs, acting like punk rockers, and they were in disco clubs. Before rap came out of that. This is also where the concept come from, the freaks come out at night, because it was a time when people was walking around with chains and spikes. But it was considered suburban culture. This is also before crime took off. This is before when I mean crime took off, okay, people were victims of violence, but it wasn't like, see, Summer Sam was the first time a lot of people got slayed. Now, now our day it became normal with 6 people died one summer. Back then it was not like that. See, we was raised in a world where people go dying every day, and you ain't gonna know who did it. It's another body gone. But back then it was big news when people was getting slaughtered and they didn't know who was doing it, and all these people getting found dead. It was traumatizing back then, because this when it first started with this serial slayers. So and also you gotta remember this. This is going on in New York. But years before this, it was just going down with Charles Manson and them in Hollywood. So this is when all that serial stuff first started. I also proved that after Charles Manson, the Bloods and the Crips started after that, and then they started terrorizing California. After this, crime took off in New York, and then the criminals started terrorizing New York. Yes. Because this is also when Wicked Spirits was in America. We talking about the 70s. But what I want y'all to understand is it's a 50th anniversary from this, because you seeing right now it's the hottest summer again. But I had to give y'all the layout that a lot of stuff we deal with is nothing new. It's in the movie. And this movie came out in 1999, but it's definitely a classic. I probably once again, it's one of the movies that'll never come on TV, so you got to pay for it. So I might got to pay for it to watch it again, because I ain't watched it in a while. But let's go. So the Summer Sam was based on a serial slayer, David Berkowitz, and these were all like every day it was newspaper articles coming out on who he was, who's next. He was allegedly leaving notes, but it had everybody in a frenzy. Everybody was scared. Then you're in San Francisco, you had the Zodiac. You had the Zodiac one, the Zodiac Slayer. So in the 70s, you're going to see it's something about them 70s and 60s. It was a dark time. It was a time of evil, wicked. All these horror movies was coming out. and people started dying a lot. That's what was going on back then. But just give me y'all the background. So let's look at the movie. So I'm not gonna give y'all a lot, but I gave y'all the background to the Summer of Sam. So I gotta go. Let's jump into it. So the movie took place in Brooklyn, but it was showing you how at this time things were just normal. People was on the block. This where the whole concept of neighborhood come from, chilling outside, everybody coming outside, chilling, relaxing. But this particular summer, it was the hottest summer, which means agitation, but it was a serial killer going around the whole summer as well. So everybody was scared and tension, and everybody was looking for everything not normal. So the guy you see with the t-shirt on, with the spiked hair, he was one of them. He was the friend from the neighborhood. He was normal, but he became a punk rocker. So when he became a punk rocker, in their eyes and everybody else, he became a weirdo. Because back then, that's what punk rock was looked at as, weirdos. Weirdos, alternative lifestyle, androgynous, and they also were bi. Everybody knew that. Back then, they called them queer. Yeah, and that's also back then when they were dealing with bashing. They were dealing with, back then, that's when they beat and bashed people that were into other lifestyles. This is where what went down at. So just to bring it up to date, the people that was fighting for rights, they was fighting since back then, because back then they did get abused. But the concept I want y'all to understand of this movie is it was a weirdo running around New York City that was a serial slayer, but nobody knew who it was. So while all this going on, he becomes a punk rocker because it was a weird time. Hold on, give me 1 second. Yeah, my bad, y'all. My bad. So look, let's go. So he got into punk rock. Remember, back then, no such thing as rap music like that. You know, this is when it was, you had people that live regular, but this is when people in New York and others started getting into this alternative lifestyle. But you got to also understand it came from the UK. It came from over there. Before that, everybody was living a regular American way. But this, when people started, it was always this thing in America where people always wanted to get into alternative stuff. It was always this thing where people always wanted to get into everything other than being an American. And even in this movie, it shows you. Every time you try to go so hard with something that's anti-American, somehow you're going to get in trouble. Because he went so far to be a punk rocker, he became different. But he also became a suspect in the bodies that was dropping because they felt like their friend was a weirdo. And the main thing what made them think that because he was living a double life. He was living a double life. He was chilling with them at daytime, but at night he was disappearing. So they assumed that after a while he was the one going out doing dirt at night. But the truth was he was living a double life because at night he was a male stripper. He was a male prostitute. Yes, he was selling himself in Greenwich Village in Manhattan, where I told you the original hip hop clubs come from, because the original hip hop clubs were the punk rock clubs. This is where the hip hoppers used to hang at, do alternative drugs, and deal with alternative people. And when the people from the UK came to New York, they went to the village. When people that were always with a certain lifestyle, they always went to the village. But what a lot of people didn't know, in New York, a lot of people in the Bronx, they knew about this stuff in Manhattan, meaning it was black people that knew about these alternative lifestyles, and they were participating in these lifestyles. I'm saying it for a reason. Because you will see this is what it all comes from. The mohawk, the spike hair, comes from punk rock. Chains around the neck. It represented rebellion. It represented everything backwards that you see today. Alternative lifestyle. That's what it was. So remember, it was always a rebellious spirit. But this is before rap was started. This is before all the stuff you see now was even accepted. It's all in the movie. At this time, The average person wasn't into that stuff at all. But the summer of Sam was a summer of a lot of stuff going on and weird stuff. So out of all the years, he flipped into a punk rocker. But you also will see with this scene, it represent that he was G-A-Y. And also what was suspect, his friend was also down low. He was the main one taking up for him. But at the end, the pressure started mounting because they like, yo, what y'all got going on? We think he's a weirdo. And they wanted to take him out. So they started putting pressure on him, like, what's up with your friend? Because we think he the one going out at night committing these slaughters. But the whole time, y'all, he didn't want them to know the secret that he was a male stripper and he was G-A-Y. He was living a double life because he was a punk rocker and he got turned out. See? He got turned out. In the movie, he gets beat up, all of that. He got turned out. But back then, it was considered a weirdo. People beat you up for no reason. Weirdo, beat you up. Get it? Plus, they knew they went into alternative lives. So he got turned down and caught up. So he not realizing, out of all the times he picked to be different, he started making himself a suspect in the slayings. Because out of nowhere, he became a weirdo. He was down with them. He was regular, but he became different. And back then, different was really different. So I want y'all to see this was the blueprint that would later on be transfused into rap. Let's go. The 44 killer, David Berkowitz, son of Sam. To this day, he's still alive. He locked up in New York Penitentiary because it's his spirit. His 5, you're going to notice they kept all the 5 serial slayers. They kept all of them alive. They never gave him the chair, him or Charles Manson. That's how they kept their spirit on. They also made them heroes and role models. That's why growing up, we always knew about all the serial slayers because it's a teaching. You know, they got fans. They got people that look up to them. That's right. They've been like that. So the summer, he took out 6 people, but they didn't know when it was going to stop. They didn't know, and they didn't know who was next. But it was said that his target was woman with a particular hair color. I think it was blonde, something like that, and all the women started coloring their hair brunette, stuff like that. But he had a particular pick. But it's the thing is, it's the frenzy. And this frenzy had everybody scared. So nobody knew he was going to attack, and nobody knew it was who. So every day the pressure was mounting every day on who's doing these slayings. So after a while, his friends turned on him. And they basically was letting him be known, like, yo, we know you on that weirdo stuff. So they just couldn't prove what he was doing. But they know he was doing something weird. He was doing something he ain't supposed to be doing. But it also showed in this movie, y'all, how they were all phobic. How they were phobic, but some of them were really still dealing with that behavior. Get it? And so what I'm also showing you is this is a time in the 70s where this alternative lifestyle was already taking place, which we would now call a rainbow life, hippie, whatever you want to call it. This when it first started really, this when it became famous, this one was really going down in the 70s. That's why you're going to know in the 70s, when you think 70s, that was the time of all sex. Babies being born, all sexual behavior, major sex. 70s was the most sexual time ever. And then you're going to see that time came back around now. Yeah. Only difference is back then it wasn't all those STDs. Yeah. But if you look in the background, you'll see that other man standing there. He was a man out the closet. He was from the neighborhood. He was hanging with him too. So also was really showing you that they were phobic and they always get it. They were really phobic. But the whole thing they was really scared of was they didn't know if he was a slayer. And they also didn't know if he had firearms in his guitar, because he was using the guitar as a front. He was a punk rocker, but he wasn't going to play just no music. He was also available. Yup. The same thing people doing now, y'all. Because it also was showing, it shows you in the movie, y'all. See the disco? But it showed us in this movie that you're going to always try to be opposite of the American lifestyle, but it's always going to end up bad for you. See, you're not going to want to get a job. You're going to be different, but you're going to wind up selling your buns. You're going to wind up doing a whole lot of stuff you just don't want to do, but it's the path you take when you always trying to be different. See, what people didn't understand, this land was set up to live a certain way, and if you don't live like that, you're just going to always fail. Whether you like it or not, it's set up to be like that. So it always been these alternative lifestyles. Now we're going to get into when this behavior was put in the rap. And you're going to see it very, very clear how I got put in the rap. This will also, the concept come from chilling on the block. All right? Because if you want to be technical, that comes from Italian and Irish neighborhoods. Italian, Irish, Jewish neighborhoods. That's where the whole concept of chilling outside on the block neighborhood come from. All right? Let's go. Now I'm going to show you how I got put in rap music. The 70s. This is a picture of 1976. Grandmaster Flash on the turntable. Huh? Alternative lifestyle back then was Jerry curl. You're going to see the spikes on the leather jacket. The spikes on the leather jacket was only dealt with in this area of the village in this type of lifestyle. All right? You see now it's put in rap because these are the babies that was around this stuff and they was in the punk rock clubs. It's just that they were different. They would be now considered the different type of blacks, which you would call weirdos. But back then they were considered the cool guys because they taught this new culture that they learned from Europeans. They taught it in the neighborhood through rap music. That's Africa Bambaataa. You're going to see it with its chains and spikes. See that? Hip-hop started with chains and spikes because that's where it come from, punk rock, chains and spikes. These are the young black men that were hanging at these punk rock clubs with him. Are you getting the concept? They are the ones that were intrigued by this lifestyle, the alternative lifestyle that we now will call GAY, bossa, whatever you want to call it. In this world is normal. At this time, it was not in the community until it went through this rap music. So I'm showing y'all where it come from. Because if I ask all of them, I already know the history. Like I said, the ones that had the money, the CEOs, the executives, the managers, this is where they hung at in the alternative clubs. Looking for talent. But back then, they were the ones going. That's why you see YMCA, you're going to see how they always dress. Village. See that? It was in rap. Now, let me get into the part where you're going to see that hip-hop was born out of all of this. And these are the weirdos that started it. Or these are the weirdos that were picked to be the leaders of it. So let me show you the concept now. You see the village hat, all of that. Y'all all know that means sex bondage hats now. You know what all that mean now. All that stuff they was wearing was sex bondage outfits. See that? The hat he got on a whole sex bondage outfit. That's right. So what else you looking at? How they knew the power of the radio in the 70s. You now can see how the radio was really used as a brainwash mechanism. The radio was the tool of the Pied Piper. They knew that. The radio, the bigger it is, the louder you play it, people going to come outside. People going to follow that radio. That's why I know the history of hip-hop. It started with the DJ, the one that controlled the music. He's the one that get everybody out the house. But back then, they knew the power of that radio. Then when you know the history of the radio, you'll know all of that technology, radio, turntables, beat machines, all that stuff come from Europe. That's right. But this will be the mechanism that will be used in every neighborhood to get people to love rap. So instead of looking at a radio, look at it now as a brainwashing device that they knew was a brainwashing device that they knew would have power and bring them kids out the house. They knew that. They knew that radio was the weapon and device that would turn people throughout the years with this music shit. They knew it back then, y'all. Because without the music, it wouldn't have worked. If they were just preaching, it wouldn't have worked. So let me show you. Grandmaster Flash beginning of hip-hop, Africa Bambaataa the beginning of hip-hop. See? They knew the power of that radio. They knew the power of that radio. And they also knew that the radio will always be attracted by the young people. Not just the music, the way it looked. It was a different technological device back then. You gotta remember technology back then. That's when the radio was popping. You got that right there. That's when the whole concept come from. Listen to the radio all day. This is when that first rap record came on the radio. It was very important. People listening for that song all day. This is where it all started from. But see, they knew exactly what it was. They knew exactly what they were doing. And they knew the power of this music. All right? So when I tell you they knew about the Pied Piper, they knew about that. See? Pied Piper. See the kids in the back? See the kids, right? They knew, y'all. So I'm telling you, just remember, the whole hip-hop shit was controlled. What else the son of Sam admitted he did? He's the one that was burning all the buildings in New York. Before he did these slayings, he was burning down all the property. Then you heard about how a lot of stuff in the Bronx got burnt down because it was a lot of insurance scams. He was the one doing a lot of the burnings. And then remember, hip-hop was born in them burning buildings, in that burning borough. That's right. Hip-hop was born out the wickedest borough at that time because that's where all the wicked shit was going down at. Yes, all it was a reason. The same way hip-hop was being created under wicked-ass spirit at that time. That's right. For those who know about spirit. Hip-hop wasn't even made at a good time. No, it wasn't. So this is where you see that everything was crossbred. It started from somewhere. It came from the UK as punk rock. It hit the clubs in New York. Then it got influence to others. And then it spread throughout communities. Disco. Punk rock. And then you're going to see punk rock died, disco died. Now you hear about rap dying. Because the same, everything that went on in disco, everything that went on in rap, same thing went on in punk rock. Only difference is, back then, people weren't slaying each other. People that slayed people were called serial, you know what I'm saying, weirdos. But see, this before games, and this before people walked around with all these big clips and guns. He was called a 44 slayer because he walked around with a 44, a 6-shooter. But you're going to see after that, it started being this stuff called Tech 9s, Mac 11s, ghost guns, AK-47 choppers. But you didn't look at, it was people in your neighborhood that were actually serial killers. That's right. And it went on for years. But this was the spirit that went into rap. It was a spirit. The punk rock spirit and the terrorist spirit. That's right. Because this is where it all come from. But the whole concept was, it was a hot summer. Everybody was on edge. Nobody was to be trusted. And everybody weirdo was suspect. So we kind of dealing with that right now. It's kind of back to that. We dealing with a hot summer. A lot of people are weird. A lot of people ain't who they say they are. And a lot of people being watched. And there's no coincidence. Hip hop is at the end. Just like punk rock, just like disco. But I wanted to show y'all how these cultures always been opposite and alternative to the American lifestyle. These are the cultures where the drugs are always permitted. The origin, you know what I'm saying? RAPEs, all that other crazy stuff was in all of this. It was taught. So now you got to think about before cameras and before all this stuff, when they told you that all the drugs was in the Bronx, all of the drug victims, all of the kids without no proper parents, then you're going to see they sent these rappers to play that music. So all those people with broken homes will follow them. So when I told you rap is in people's heart, it's in their heart because they was raised on this. And the thing is, you just imagine how many people got violated back then with no law and order, no rules and regulations under this thing called rap. Now that you know what they all were about in the 70s. Now I wanted y'all to all see how this shit was taught. Because before all of this shit, it wasn't like that. It wasn't like that. It wasn't like that. Then look at how every generation, things kept coming out, different drugs. Now you got, see, back then, all of them from the dope epidemic, the heroin. They're the kids of that. Then you had the crack era. Then you had the kids of the crack era. They were victims. See, every era had a crisis that made kids have nothing but rap music, have nothing but celebrities. So that's why I say this is in the hearts of other people different. But it was a teaching. And also, back then, they were able to do whatever, because back then, if you spoke up, they say, what? You're lying. You a liar. And that's how it went back then. What else went back then? It was a saying called what? Children should be seen, not heard. So that was the main time of people getting abused. This is where it started at, and this is where it became normal. All right? So when I tell you everything you hear about going on now, it went on back then, but it was taught. Even in the movie, he get abused because he's a punk rocker. He gets abused. Yes, he does. So I ain't gonna tell y'all too much. Everything I do on Movie Decode is a certified classic. If you watch it, it's always gonna be a good movie. And I like thrillers, and this is like a thriller because you don't know how it's gonna end, and that's why I like to tell y'all a lot. You don't know how it's going to end. You don't know how it's going down. And it's also based on a true story. So those are all my favorite movies. Movies based on true stories. Movies based on reality. But movies also that you got to decode. You got to watch it. You got to watch it more than once. And you're going to see it is so many messages in these movies. And that's what I call a good movie. All right, so I'm going to say this. For me, knowing Spike Lee, people got their picks. I know about Do the Right Thing, all that stuff. But to tell you the truth, to me, this is his best movie because he went outside the box. He was diverse. He went into history. He gave good screenplay. And this is a good movie. But you're also going to see, you don't see this movie a lot. You don't see it promoted. You ain't going to see it. Because I'm going to tell you again, all the best movies, you got to look for them. And all the best movies got truth in it. That's how it works. So no matter how much you got Netflix, Hulu, all these applications, there's certain movies you're never going to see unless you know about them and unless you happen to buy them. But you got to know about them first. So that's why I'm doing Movie Decode, to bring out all the good movies that have been filmed already. And another thing I say is most of the best movies that have been filmed, it is nothing that's going to come out that's going to top it. And that's a fact. So on that note, another episode of Movie Decode. Got more coming. Just evening out this history, y'all, because we're going to a new world and a lot of this stuff going to be forgotten. But a lot of the classic American movies are your encyclopedias. That's it. So on that note, y'all enjoy the rest of y'all day. I'll holler at y'all later. One.